Welcome to the Possibility Action Network podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton, aka Possibility Man. We're committed to bringing you guests who strive to better people's lives and serve as a force for good in the world. Our guest today is Tammy Cox. She is a transformational coach dedicated to helping individuals, especially women, who have experienced trauma. Significant childhood events shaped her life, and Tammy is on a mission to help heal childhood trauma. Tammy Cox, welcome to the show today.
Oh, Stephen, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am looking forward to our conversation. But first, an announcement to our listeners and our viewers. Follow, like, and share this podcast wherever you find it. It's your opportunity to co-create with us to get this information out to the world. Tammy, I wanted to talk to you because you have some unique insights into childhood trauma. But let me ask you my very first question. You have identified as a transformational coach, and there are a lot of titles out there, as you well know, life coach, personal development coach, but transformational coach is one of yours. What is a transformational coach?
That's a great question. Never been asked that before, by the way. So if we look at our life, we all have things that we would like to change about our life and who we are, right? And so for me, a transformational coach is someone who gets you from where you're at to where you want to be. So and a lot of times, when it comes to trauma, trauma is the one thing that is holding people back because they've got all this negative emotion stored in their body. And so if we could just snip off the anchors that are really holding you back from going to where you want to be, like you just go, boop.
I like that. So what you're saying to me, as I hear it, and maybe others will too, is that a transformational coach can help an individual make a shift in a course correction in their life to get to a better place.
Yeah. And it's really about like, we like to think that correcting our behaviors will get us to where we want to go. And that is kind of true, except we're not getting to the root cause of why you do the things that you do. And so in order for us to change your results, we got to change your belief system. Because if you don't believe that you're lovable, such as I didn't, then you're not going to attract love. It literally, you can't let it in. It'll be all around you, but you can't let it in. So if you don't deal with things on the root level, which is the belief system, then you're really not going to shift the behaviors all that much.
Understood. Okay. So I know trauma is a big part, the centerpiece of your work, along with, healing marriage and that kind of thing. But what is trauma? What is that?
Trauma is quite simply a high state of negative emotion. And in the first 5 years, trauma is very important. So what happens in a high state of negative emotion is a belief comes in and gets stamped onto your subconscious mind. And I'll give you one of mine, like, I came from a lot of abuse in my childhood. And in those moments, when I go back to the moments of the event, the belief as a little girl that I held was, I'm not important and I'm not lovable. And so that tracks on every single one of my traumatic events. And sometimes they're what we would consider small, and sometimes they're big, but they're not war always. In fact, most of the time it's not war. Sometimes it's just as simple as like you being corrected as a child and the way that you took it in that moment. It can be a very small, little, minute thing to anyone else watching, but for that child, it created a massive impact on them that they'll carry out throughout their life.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you some questions about how trauma showed up for you a little later, but I'm going to go back a little bit and go from a broad view. There's a book, I mentioned to you before we started talking, that Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey wrote this book entitled What Happened to You? Now, I'm
Mhm.
not sure if you're comfortable answering this question, but I'm going to ask it. What happened to you that led you to say that you've experienced childhood trauma?
Oh, okay. Well, this is a good one. We're digging. Okay.
Mm,
So, in my early years, I grew up with a father that was controlling and abusive. I wasn't allowed to think for myself or do for myself. It was very controlled environment. And it was physically abusive, but it was more of a control thing than anything. And I found out when I was 11 that my father had AIDS. In
mm,
fact, he was dying. And so 1 month goes by and he's gone, right? And so this was a traumatic time in my life because I, on one hand, felt some sort of relief because my dad he scared me. I was very scared of him. And so there was this relief that I had. And then there was this shame that came in because of the
mm,
relief that I had. And
mhm,
so I was torn by, because one side of me loved my father, and the other side of me was just absolutely petrified of him and felt all this shame that I had basically wished him, I felt responsible for his death.
mm,
So yeah, I spent many of my teenage years just very angry, angry at
mm.
the world, angry at my parents, blaming everyone, blaming God, you name it. And so
Yeah.
that was a big part of my journey. And the reason why I do what I do now.
Yeah. So, trauma happened to you. It showed up in your life. Who would you say are affected by trauma? I mean, is it children affected by trauma? Is it, girls affected by, who would you say are affected by trauma?
Everyone is affected by
Mm,
trauma. And the interesting part is the first 5 years of our life is when trauma has the biggest impact on us because we
mm,
don't have the upper faculties of mind yet. So basically, everything that was said to you in the first 5 years of your life goes doop, drops right down. You don't even have the ability to reject it because you don't have those
mm,
upper faculties. So you are the person you are because of all those, essentially, because of all those beliefs of the people around you that plopped right down into you. So,
mhm,
and trauma actually tracks on the DNA. It goes back 7 generations on each, the mother and father side. So everyone's affected by trauma. There's no way around it. It's just to the degree and how much of us are doing the internal work to neutralize the trauma that is really impacting us.
mhm. Yeah, that's interesting. I can imagine, Tammy, that a kid who hears stuff about, ghosts, if they're young, may, get attached to that and may become afraid of the dark. Is this the kind of thing? Or a college kid who may hear you're stupid
Abs-
all the time.
Yep.
The kid doesn't have those defenses, right? To say, no,
Hmm.
reframe those. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
absolutely true. We don't have the ability to reject the information when we're young. So it
Mhm.
just all goes in. And that's why we take on, kind of the thought patterns of our parents.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a wake up call if you're a parent or anyone who works with children. But let me ask, so what are some signs of it? If you were going to step back and you say, there are 100 kids in a room, and someone asked you, well, pick out some kids who might have been affected by trauma. What are some of the signs, indicators of a traumatic childhood?
Well, like I said, everyone's experienced trauma, but
Mm,
ones that have experienced probably more severe trauma, they could be louder, dominating,
mm, mm,
aggressive. Others could be withdrawn, shy,
mm,
hiding, not wanting to be seen or heard. I mean, it's the whole gamut, but those are the two more extreme ones that I see
mm,
where one either doesn't want to be seen, that's their defense mechanism, because we all have our
mm,
defense mechanisms in trauma. And so for the kid that was like beaten, they could either become more aggressive, like their way of being is, or personality, we could call it. They
mhm,
adopted more of like the dominance, like I'll scare you
mm.
before you can get to me, or the very passive one that's like, don't see me, don't hide,
Yeah,
be real quiet, be real small.
yeah.
But those are the two dominant ones I see.
Yeah, I can imagine that in a classroom with a teacher and about 25 students, we may see some kids who act out just like you've said. So the bully may be someone, we aren't saying that necessarily, maybe someone who might have experienced childhood trauma. Would you say?
Oh, yeah. I mean, where
Yeah.
do they learn the aggression from? I mean, that was
Mm,
me. I'm speaking for myself too. It's like,
yeah.
I came from an aggressive family. There was violence in my family every day. And so when I went out into the world, I was very shocked when people are like, no,
Mm,
you can't put your hands on people. I was
mm,
shocked. I like that is my family dynamic. So I had to
mm,
learn how to be in the world differently than my house.
mhm. That's a message for all of us, though, is that if a kid, a child, is a bully, there are some questions that I think that we need to ask about that. But you also said a kid that's withdrawn. The kid appears to be shy, and so you're saying that that could be a suggestion, or at least an indicator that that child might have gone through something and is having difficulties coping.
Well, the personalities we take on, I use
Mhm.
quotes because they're adjustable. I don't want anyone to think that they have a fixed personality, but
Yeah,
we adapt to our family of origin.
yeah,
So however, whatever you need to be in order to survive your family of origin is who you become. And that's through the
mhm,
perception of the child. That's why you'll take three kids from the exact same abusive household and they have completely different tendencies and completely different personalities because it's how
mhm,
they perceive they'll be safest. So the
mhm,
one who's aggressive and that's their defense mechanism. That's how they're
mhm,
protecting themselves from the world that is perceived as unsafe. The one that's
mhm,
shy, quiet, withdrawn, trying not to be seen or heard, that's how they perceive that they will be safe in a, dangerous world. Those are those
yeah,
beliefs that we were talking about.
yeah.
And
You know,
those beliefs are usually passed down from the parents. So if the parents perceive life as unsafe and all that goes into the child, but the way the child acts it out is
mhm,
based on their perception of that belief as well.
mhm. Yeah, I see. I was having a conversation with someone recently, and it wasn't an interview, just a general conversation. And then trauma came up. I might have asked, I was thinking about this conversation with you and
Mhm.
asked them about trauma. And he said, unhealed trauma is life. And I'm thinking, whoa, this is like about everything, right? So it seems like he was suggesting that it's a traveling companion. So here's my question to you. How did trauma show up in your life as you traveled through life? Let me
Mm.
just throw out a couple of words to get you started. How did it affect, for example, your sense of self-worth?
Oh, well, like I said earlier, it's not really the trauma that creates it, it's the belief that you placed on the event.
Mm,
So I'll speak to that because that was like my beliefs. The belief was the story I made up about myself because of the traumatic event. So it's not the
mhm,
event itself, right? And that's why some people can come up with like I didn't even have what one would consider a traumatic event, but a belief came from it that then massively shaped the way I saw
mm,
money and finances. So I will speak to the belief part, but the beliefs that we call them life commands in my line of work. They're basically the negative beliefs that you hold that are really running the show on your life. And I had two
mm,
main ones regarding myself, which is I'm unlovable and I'm not important. And
mhm,
so, how did that show up in my relationships? How did that show up in my jobs? How did that show up in the way that I presented myself to the world? Everything,
mhm,
everything went back to those beliefs I had about myself. So, I sabotaged almost all my relationships, whether they
mhm,
were romantic, with family, it didn't matter. I sabotaged them because if they told me that they loved me,
mhm,
then they were liars because I didn't believe that I was lovable. Right. So you
mhm,
see how everything shapes the beliefs. Everything in our life rotates around our belief system because it's literally how we perceive life.
mhm. So it's from what you've said is that it's difficult to establish intimate connections. By intimate, I don't necessarily mean romantic, but with other people
Yes.
because you just don't feel good about yourself. What about overachiever, underachiever. Did that show up for you
Oh
because
yeah.
of trauma?
Oh yeah.
Mm,
Absolutely. Um, it has to, because
mm,
it's molded our belief system. So, think about if a person doesn't believe that they're lovable and they don't believe that they're important, how is that going to play out in their life? It's going to affect everything, and it did for
mm,
me. So what I see outside of me, what I see in other people, the overachievers, like we'll look at um athletes, we'll look
mm,
at actors that just have to have success because they think, oh, if I have success, then this belief that I'm not important, I'll use mine, I'm not important, I'm not lovable, will go away. Well, they don't.
mhm,
So they get the fame. Matthew Perry talks about this in his book. He's like, I got the fame because I thought that was going to be what changed my belief system. He didn't use these terms, but it's just me deciphering the code. He said, once I got the fame, I thought, or Marilyn Monroe is a great example too. Once I get the fame, then I'll feel this certain sort of way. And then they get
mhm,
there and they still feel like absolute crap about themselves. So it's the if we're not getting to the root cause, we're really not going to change how we feel inside. We may change
yeah,
our outside reality, but it won't change how we feel inside. But I
right.
noticed that a lot of people who are driven to success and driven to fame, they get there and it's quite empty for them because it didn't give them it didn't change their emotional state, and it can't.
Yeah, yeah. And we're going to get to your healing journey in a moment, but I'm going to stay with this whole notion about how it showed up for you. I can imagine some people feeling, not feeling good about themselves, going to school, getting the degree, right? And expecting holding that sheepskin changes their world.
Mm-hmm.
But you say that if you don't change those limiting beliefs, what happens, Tammy? Nothing changes. Yeah.
Yeah, it might be exciting for the moment. It might be exciting for
Mhm.
a hot minute, but then it's just shallow and empty because
Yeah.
you really didn't shift internally. Because
Uh-huh.
there's a law of the universe. It's as above, so below, as within, so without. So if you don't shift within, then outside can change for a real quick second, but it'll go. But we see this with those who win the lottery. They win all this
Mhm.
money, and 5 years later, they're completely broke. Why? Because they didn't have the capability of holding on to it because they didn't shift the inside.
Mhm.
You got to
Yeah.
shift the
But
inside if you want your results to change indefinitely.
yeah, and we're going to get into that in a moment. But I want to ask you one more question about achievement. What about the underachiever? Let's say that a kid heard that he, or she was dumb. You don't learn, you don't do anything right, and the kid learned to perform poorly. Could that have been a result of trauma?
Yes,
Mm,
absolutely.
mm,
I would, if I was presented with a person like that, I'd be like, who was it that beat you down, mom or dad? And
mm,
sometimes the crazy part is that like I explained, that we track beliefs on our DNA. So sometimes it's not even experience they had personally, but it's tracked on their line. Like, maybe their father just was treated very poorly by his dad.
mm,
And he didn't necessarily feel it for his son, but it tracks down because we hold all those beliefs and they just go from
mm.
generation to generation to generation. So, but most of the time it's because they had a parent that was very, very hard on them.
Yeah. But you discovered good news because you talk about your healing journey. Now you are a coach and got training programs. So let's talk about your healing journey and let's try to generalize it to what other people can do. What about
Mhm.
you? How did you heal? Or, start your process?
Ah, the healing journey. My healing journey wasn't as quick as it could have been, but that's good because I learned a lot of things that don't work. Um, a lot of things that don't work that have been ruled out now with modern science is regular talk therapy. Doesn't work.
Mm,
Doesn't go down to the root cause. So just talking about a problem doesn't solve it. Um, So I went through all that. I went through, the therapies, the counseling. I went through, medication, religion, like everything. And it would seem like it'd get better for a split second, but then things would go back to the way that they were. And it wasn't until I started neutralizing my trauma and really going back to my childhood and going through the events and neutralizing my trauma before I started to really feel different.
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
had
you
to,
said so,
yeah, go ahead.
go ahead. No, please finish your thought.
I was just going to say I had to recognize that my entire identity was shaped around these ideas that were placed inside of me very young. And I
Yeah.
had to see that I had the ability to change them.
Hmm. Now, what you just said is interesting to me because, you said that, knowing that you were hurting inside, knowing that you were hurting, you were looking for a solution. And you mentioned talk therapy, religion, all of those kinds of things. So, is that a pattern of people who might have been traumatized, that they're looking for help, and that may have difficulties finding it, but they're on a search to feel better? Is that what you've
Yeah.
noticed?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we have to seek in order to find, and we have to
Mm,
knock before the door will be opened. So yeah, I always tell people, you gotta seek and keep seeking. You gotta knock and keep knocking. And that's those of us who like for me, maybe not everyone was in that dire place that I was at, but I was like, I'm either taking my life or I'm healing it. There was no in
mm,
between for me because
mm,
there wasn't like it was so tumultuous within me that I
mm,
just could not stand to even think about continuing to live that way, especially
mm,
after I became a wife and a mom. All my triggers started alarming so loud. I felt like I was just twitching within myself on a
mm.
daily basis. So it was really kind of
Mm.
life or death for me. And
Yeah.
for those who are in the place that I was at, they're definitely seeking. They're looking for
Hmm.
anything to help. Um,
Yeah.
but not all continue the seeking or continue the knocking. They're like, oh, this is nothing works, which once again is a belief. But I just knew that this was my life's journey. I knew
Mm.
it.
Yeah. And that seeking, Tammy, would you say that it could also include trying to find relief with drugs or alcohol or
Hmm.
prescription meds? Would you say
Yep.
that?
Oh,
Mm.
yeah. Some
Yeah.
people, they find that and it's just this temporary band-aid and they're like, it's okay if it's just temporary. I just want to
Yeah.
feel. And that's why I say, you know, like with people who are in recovery, if they don't do the internal work, the band-aids they don't do anything
Mm.
because even, getting sober is a band-aid. That's why we see that people with addiction, if they don't heal the trauma, what they'll do is they'll just go to something else. And sometimes
Mhm.
it's something that the world perceives as a good addiction, like working
Yeah.
or um, or working out. Like we've seen some go to and that might help for a bit. It could definitely relieve some pain.
Mm.
However, if we don't get to the root cause, the person is still living with tremendous pain, internal pain.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
I believe that where with like I love Bruce Lipton's work. He's a scientist and he talks about, trauma a lot and how it tracks. And he talks about how we have this ability to literally become different people, but we just choose not to because it would be uncomfortable to change.
So help us out with it. Where does the person start? How did you heal? How can we heal from our traumatic past?
Well, I always think it's great to have someone guiding you who's done it
Mm.
themselves. So I'll say that. But then on top of it, you got to start investigating yourself. You got to get really curious as to why you do the things you do. So if you're looking at an area of your life that you are struggling with, so for me, a lot of people that come to me, it's relationships. And they're like, my marriage is crumbling, or, I haven't been able to find a lasting love. I've had all these relationships, none of them seems to stick. And then we got to follow the patterns. Okay, well, what's the pattern that's going on in your life? Okay, well, it's good for a little bit and then this happens and then this happens. And we start to examine all the patterns and we go backwards from the current all the way back to the childhood, looking at the patterns. And you got to track them back. And then with the patterns comes the beliefs. Well, what would you have to believe about yourself? Or what would you have to believe about life in order for you to feel this way about these events? And
Mhm.
that's where you're really going to start to hit gold because when you start investigating your beliefs, you're shining a light on your identity, why
Mm.
you are the way that you are. And from there you can shift anything in your life, but you have to get really intimate with who you are and why you behave the way that you do.
Mhm. Some people, Tammy, struggle with self-esteem, just self-confidence. And they've
Almost
been saying,
everyone. Almost everyone,
but
Stephen.
yeah, and then we try to think, well, where did that come from? How do you help
Mhm.
a person identify where that might have come from?
Oh, I think most people know where it comes from.
Oh,
Don't you
okay.
think? I
I'm
well,
not sure.
so I mean, we kind of grow up in trauma in as we talk about trauma, it's like trauma is not a negative thing. Trauma is actually a very good thing, and it's the way our subconscious has kept us alive. Okay.
Mhm.
So it's not a bad thing. Let's scratch that. It is a very good thing. However, um, we do have the opportunity to shift its negative power on us by
Mhm.
neutralizing it. And that's what I highly recommend everyone does. When we do that, right? We can, when we go back and we see where we came up with these beliefs, we actually find those answers that you're looking for
Mhm.
because someone said it to you. Someone planted that seed. We are like, we have all these seeds within us. I call them beliefs, but there's all these seeds that were planted within you, and then they're watered. Then they're watered and watered and watered and watered till they create a full blown plant, and then it bears fruit. This is what the Bible
Mhm.
uses a lot analogies about the seed starting as a seed, and the seed is a belief. So that belief was planted within you, and then throughout your life it was watered by several people. So, for instance, I planted that belief. We all, if we're really getting down to the finite part of trauma, I planted the belief within me, right? When
Mhm.
my father was abusing me or mistreating me, I had the belief or thought in my mind that said, I'm not lovable. That's why he's doing this. That was my
Mhm.
choice. But regardless, the seed was planted in that moment, in the earliest moment. First time my dad hit me, I was an infant. So that
Oh
seed
my.
was planted right
Mhm.
there in my subconscious mind. Then throughout the years, anytime anyone would mistreat me, water that seed, water that seed, water that seed. The seed started to grow, grow, grow. It turned into a big old plant, and now it's bearing fruit, and the fruit is everywhere, right?
Mhm.
And so to go back and really deal with a belief that big, I will not say it's quick and it's not easy. It still pops up. I will still have moments in my life where I will feel bad about myself and I'll be like, what's the belief that's coming up for me? And it'll be that one. Okay. Because it had a lot of fruit that it bore. But by identifying, oh, there's that tree, and going continuously cutting the tree down, cutting the tree down, cutting the tree down, over time, I'm training my subconscious mind out of those beliefs little by little.
Mhm. Mhm.
So,
I
but
see.
but we can always track it back. And if a person struggles, then just go do something like hypnotherapy, because the subconscious mind forgets nothing. It tracks every single thing you've ever done. It's all on there. But our
Mhm.
conscious mind, in order to protect ourselves, sometimes we don't, and I see this a lot with men. With men, they have a lot of holes there, a lot of stuff that they don't remember. And it's just a defense mechanism for you because it was so painful. Right. And
Mhm.
so oftentimes your conscious brain says, oh, this is just too painful for him. We're cutting off this memory. That
Mhm.
did you see the movie Inside Out, the new one? It's a kids movie.
No.
You probably didn't. It's
Okay.
so representative of
Mm,
how like beliefs and identities are created within us at that early young age and how we connect to memories. But you can pull up anything on the subconscious mind. You just might need a little
mm,
help.
mhm. So a person who is walking around with the effects of trauma, because you've said, look, it's not the trauma, it's what you begin to think about yourself that you're carrying through life. I can imagine such a person stepping into a lot of holes, a lot of potholes in life if they're being driven by that negative belief system. Well, what does a person do, Tammy, after they've caused a lot of accidents in life, be it relationships, be it whatever? You're carrying that baggage. What do you do about that? If you follow my
Oh,
question. Yeah.
yeah. You got to let that go. Forgiveness
Uh,
is such a key component to healing. You have to forgive the past.
mm,
And what was so hard for me was when I really got down to it, because I thought, oh, have all this animosity towards these people who did this to me, right? But when it really came down to it, I had the hardest time forgiving myself. I
mm,
carried around this big bag of shame, wore it on my back, and it just, and that's what I see almost everyone doing. We just have this,
mm,
and our bags are different sizes. They're not all the same. But when I take someone through a process, a healing process, um, almost all of them say at the end of it, I'll ask them how they feel, and they're like, I feel lighter. And I'm like, because we just took a brick out of that bag that's been on your back that you've been
mm,
carrying for however many years, right?
mm,
We're alleviating that heaviness you've been carrying. So unforgiveness is, oh, I can't stress it enough. It's such a huge part of the healing journey. Um, and it's something that I think we need to work on a daily basis. Lay down in bed at the end of every night and say, I forgive myself for every mistake. I don't believe in mistakes anymore, but mistake, anything I did out of alignment with my truest, most authentic self. I just
mm,
release it now. Release all the strings, all the everything from the past that you carry with you that has any negative um, aspect of it. For you to carry that from event to event, it's like you're bringing the whole negative past all the way up into the present moment when you don't need to. You could just break up with it. You could divorce it. You could leave it behind. You could say whatever feels good to you. I used to have my clients think of that thought and just kind of like either go like this and throw it in the trash or throw it in the toilet, and just a representation of like, no, I'm not taking that with me,
mm,
right?
mm.
You don't have
Yeah.
to.
So that's a part of your process
Yep.
that you've just shared. So a person sees it as, let's say the mailman is coming with a parcel and they say, I'm not going to take delivery. That's what you're saying about some of those negative
It's a
beliefs.
great one. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I've seen as a part of your process, you've mentioned self-love. And it's just in my mind, I can imagine that could be a hard one for someone who has gone through trauma. So
Yep.
what is self? What do you mean by you'll be hearing the word a lot? What is that? What is self-love?
Well, in order to have love for the self, you have to see yourself as the fullest version of you. You're not just a body.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, you're not just this
Yeah.
body. This gets to be your house for a period of
Mm,
time, what, 80, 100 years. I'm saying in my lifetime at least 100 years. Um but this is my avatar for that period of time, but this is not who I am. This is a piece of who I am. So, I think that for a person to really heal, they have to accept the fullness of who they are. And they are a
mm,
spiritual being having a physical experience. They are a soul, they are a spirit, and they're not just a lump of clay walking around. Like
yeah.
that clay would not be alivened and able to touch, feel, taste, smell, all the wonderful things that we can do in this vehicle. They could not do if it was not impressed upon by spirit. So you have to accept that you are not just a body. And
Mhm.
if all that is what many call God, if all that is saw you fit to have this physical vessel, then you must be divine and you must be pretty special. So,
Mhm.
what will it take for you to see yourself as the fullest version of you and not just the meat suit walking around, walking and talking and eating and playing? Like you gotta accept that you are more than this physical vessel.
Uh-huh. So the spiritual component is a big part. Is that a part of your process as well?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. We got
Well,
to deal with the
how,
full
mhm.
being. You're
But I
not,
mean,
yeah, sorry.
no, no, I'm just saying because some people will ask, well, how do I do that? I mean, how do I realize what you realize? They may want to do it, but they don't know where to start.
I mean, that's why I can't emphasize enough that if you don't have someone, I've always had mentors. I've always had someone that was mentoring me, and I've always had someone that I was mentoring. And it's
Mhm.
like, we just make this chain. We make this chain
Yeah,
all the way up to the fullest version of ourselves, which I believe it's infinite, right? We
yeah,
can't even measure a man's potential. There's no way to know what we're capable of.
yeah,
Look at how much we've grown in the past 50, 100 years, um, in our knowledge and our understanding. So there's just no measuring human potential. And so, like, sky's the limit, right? But I think the quickest way is to really find someone who has what you want and say,
mhm,
teach me how to have this thing, right? That's the
mhm,
easiest, quickest way. But if you want to go the slow route, like I did, you'll keep walking through those open doors. You're going to knock on
mhm,
many, many doors, and you're going to just wait for someone to answer your knock. But
mhm,
um like for me, it's all these steps. I had to learn how to forgive. I had to learn how to neutralize my trauma. I had to learn how to love that little girl that still lives within me, that was lived through a lot of really difficult things.
mhm,
It's all of it. It can't be just one thing, and it's certainly not an answer that I could it's not a question that I could answer in a short period of time, but
mhm,
um those
mhm.
are some of the ways.
Yeah, it seems to be that the person who needs connections in the most, and that is the traumatized person, or at least what they made up about the trauma, is the same person who may have difficulties establishing those connections. So it
Uh-huh.
seems like you're
Yep.
damned if you do, if you're damned if you don't, and that seems
Yeah.
a difficult place to be in. What do you say
Yeah.
about that?
I mean, I think that, to be really honest, like, we didn't come here, most of us, for the easy journey. Like, who grows with easy? No one grows with easy. We grow in the fire. We grow when we're tested. We grow when having gone through a lot of crap in our lives. And so, when I was going through it, felt so miserable. I felt like I was living hell on earth. And here
Mhm,
on this side of it, after going through it, after healing from it, I'm like, that was the greatest gift, the
mhm,
greatest gift I could have been given. And I know I chose it. I
mhm,
know that I chose the life that I did. And I know that I chose it for the purpose of being able to do what I do now, which is just like, I mean, when I think about how I get to help other people heal and transform
mhm,
and wake up into the life of their dreams, it's like there's just nothing juicier or more delicious than the life I get to live now. But it wouldn't be so delicious or juicy if I hadn't been there, dragged through like hell on earth. So
mhm,
I just, it's just what you make of it. Life gets to be what you make of it. And it doesn't feel like that when you're in that powerlessness. I've been at the bottom of the emotional scale where it feels like life is just happening to you and you're just getting smacked wave after wave after wave after wave. But if I could give you any bit of encouragement, it's like, when you get to the other side, when
mhm,
you get to the other side and you get to experience the blessing that was, and it won't be a blessing until you see it as that. But when you get to the other side and you feel that peace, that unshakable peace of like, I went through
mhm.
there and like, here I sit now, it's like,
Yeah, I feel you, Tammy. But some people listening to you will say, "Well, Tammy, you are clearly smart. You are a good communicator. Those who are seeing you in video would say, you got all of these wonderful characteristics. But my situation, they would say, was pretty bad. So is trauma something that you would put on a scale and weigh and say, this is a 10-pound amount, this is a 30-pound amount, that's a 50-pound amount? Or is it trauma is just trauma?
No, because I have helped people who have gone through things that are so like incomparable to what I've been through. They're so awful.
Hmm.
And I've had people that have, you look at their childhood and most people would be like, that looks pretty darn good to me. Like that, it looks like the perfect childhood to me. And the one that perceivingly had the perfect childhood and the one it her trauma just feels so heavy and she's um going through such horrible turmoil inside of her. And this one is like blessed and sees it as a gift and like it's not weighed down by it, like so different, right? There's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just that one is looking for the positive and one is looking for the negative, and that's
Yeah.
all. That's the biggest difference I see. The one at the bottom doesn't have hope. They don't
Hmm.
feel encouraged in any way, shape, or form, and the one on the other side sees the blessing and gift in it and is eking out, pulling out all the positive that came from that event. So no, I don't believe that there's a scale like that that really measures, oh, well, this is a really horrible thing and this is not. It's like the person's experience, their perception of what happened is the only truth that matters. And we're all walking around with our own perceived truths.
Hmm.
And they're not universal truths. That means that they don't stretch across all the universe like, oh, this is the horrible stuff and this is the great stuff. It's like the
Hmm.
part of life where we get to place the meaning on every bit of life.
Yeah, I got that. That's a good one there. So trauma is trauma, and we put the stamp on it. Hey, look, you've already established that sharp trauma, the effects of childhood trauma, shows up in your life, and that could be on your job, in your relationships. But what's big for you also is how it shows up in marriage. Firstly, why are you so passionate about coaching people about marriage?
Because there is no closer mirror than a spouse. Like I said, as within, so without. So there's no more intimate relationship. Just how we said, intimacy is the biggest struggle with someone who really struggles with a lot of trauma, who has a lot of active trauma in their body. They struggle in intimacy. And what is the most intimate relationship? The one you
Yeah.
can't get away from. They're in your bed, they're in your room, they're in your finances, they're in, like, you share everything. There is nowhere else to turn, right? So it is the closest mirror. And when you struggle internally, you're going to struggle in every relationship, but more significantly in your marriage relationship.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, a lot of women that come to me, they swear up and down it's their husband. And then when we start working on them, they start to see that the experiences that they had early in life shaped the person they became, which attracted the person that they attracted, which is how it works. And so when they shift themselves, they're able to shift not only their marriage, but everything about their life.
Hmm. That's interesting. And you have established the Reclaim Your Marriage program, if I'm correct. What
Yes.
is that? What is that?
Well, basically it's for women to come in and work on themselves and heal themselves in order to heal all their relationships. Sometimes they don't even come to me about marriage. They're just struggling in life in general. And we do all this work together, all this work that I've been talking to you about, where we get to neutralize the trauma, we get
Mhm.
to recognize the patterns, and we get to go through the shifting of the belief system. basically the shifting of the thought patterns on a daily basis. And
Mm-hmm.
they get to heal.
Wow. Boy, healing sounds so attractive.
Mm-hmm.
Tammy, is there anything else in your heart that you want to share today that we haven't already touched upon?
Well, if I have any send away message, it would just be you don't have to live with anything that you currently have in your life. Whatever you're experiencing, whoever you are, whatever identities you hold now, you have the ability to change any and all of it if you so choose. You're not stuck with any of it. I think for so many people, we feel like this is who I am. This is my life circumstances. This is how it'll always be, because that's how we feel in the darkest of times. We feel things will never change. But if I can give you any hope and encouragement, it's like if you would have known who I was 20 years ago, you would see that you have the ability to change any and everything in your life that you could possibly imagine. Um, so yeah, that's the hope that I would send anyone away with.
That's great, Tammy. It sounds like what Dr. Abraham Lowe wrote before 1950 said. He was a psychiatrist, neuropsychiatrist. He said, there are no hopeless cases. And that's what I kind of feel from you is that there are no hopeless cases.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, Tammy,
Absolutely.
I really enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Yes, I have loved this so much. I've loved this so much. I'm going to have a wonderful day just because of, and thank you for your amazing questions. Because honestly, the way the interviewer asks the questions is really what unlocks like the pearls. So
Uh-huh.
thank you for your very insightful questions.
Hmm. Well, thank you. Well, you have been listening to the Possibility Action Network podcast. Our guest today has been Tammy Cox, a transformational coach and marriage counselor. I'm your host, Stephen Middleton. Until next time, good day.
You are not alone. Just keep on, keep on, keep on going. Just press on, press on, press on.